Well, this is a fun lecture here. We're on defense mechanisms. And I always start out class by saying, all right, for those of you that have taken this class to analyze all your friends and families, we finally got to the lecture that might help you with this. So, what defense mechanisms are is when the id and the superego go to war, the ego has to try to balance them all. So, remember the iceberg? The iceberg that feels this tidal wave underneath, and it's trying to balance them both out. So the ego uses a variety of tactics to satisfy them both. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is I'm going to go over some of the various defense mechanisms that are used by the ego. There's many more than what I'm going over here, but these are a few, and you could do some further reading on these. They're really fun. Now, one more thing that I want you to know is this. We all use these as protection devices. So you'll notice them in yourselves, you'll notice them in other people. But I think that you should steer clear from telling people, oh, you're engaged in denial. Oh, that's a rationalization. I think you're projecting on me. I think it's just going to annoy them. But I do think that this lecture may help you to understand yourself better and may help you to understand other people better. And I think it's great. We're going to get to a really powerful portion in our lecture where I feel like knowing this information may allow you to never take something personal again. That when people come at you, you can just say, "Oh, this is not really about me." All right, let's get started. The first one that I'm going to go over is denial. So denial is when we refuse to accept reality. So I'll try to make a visual for you. There's some things that are so painful or so uncomfortable that what the ego does is it just kind of puts on a blindfold. So if you can imagine the little ego, remember that little emoji? Maybe you could picture, and I said, why does he look confused? And the reason why he looks confused was because the id is telling him one thing and the superego is telling him another thing. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get so overwhelmed that I just want to turn a blind eye to something. My kids, there's so many of them, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just don't want to deal with any of this. Or sometimes at finals or something, the students are so nervous and stressed and asking me so many questions that I'm just like, oh, I'm getting overwhelmed. And so kind of what some of us do is we just kind of shut down. And that's what the ego is doing, is it just says, nope, this is too overwhelming. I'm not even going to acknowledge that it's happening. I'm just going to hide from it. So you'll see this especially when we look at the stages of death and dying. When we go to that chapter, the first stage of death and dying is denial. Is the first thing is, or the first thing when we have a really are diagnosed with a terrible illness would be denial. Or maybe the first stage when somebody breaks up with you on a suddenly you might say, oh no, they're just joking. So it's kind of this tactic that we use to kind of garner our resources so that we can deal with it. And I always talk about this as like drug addicts and people that, they go into a stage of denial. We go into a stage of denial when we don't want to accept our responsibility or don't want to accept that there's a problem. Also, you see this, like I said, with death, is at a sudden death funeral where somebody got killed and was totally unexpected. A lot of times the people that are closest to the person that died will seem like they're fine. Like, oh, they're fine. They're handling this so well. But actually, probably what it is a denial. What's going on in their head is this is not really happening. This is just a dream. This isn't, this isn't, I'm going to wake up from all this. And then as time goes on, then the emotions set in. So our initial defense mechanism to like overwhelming, sudden, kind of unexpected news, a lot of times is denial. And I think what you need to recognize in people is they need to go into this for a while. If you try to say, man, you're in denial, why don't you come out of it? You can say that. And, maybe if it's something that's been going on for a long time, like a drug addiction or something like that, maybe you want to keep saying it. It's what they're doing to try to protect themselves from this overwhelming news. Okay, now what's in line, what you'll see a lot of times from denial is instead of denial, it's like a form of denial where some people just in denial, I'm not acknowledging this. This is not happening at all. But what you'll see a lot of times with denial is you'll see rationalization. For me, this is the granddaddy of them all. If you guys start looking for this, I swear you'll see rationalization in yourselves and in others at least 5 times today. So, rationalization is when you make up acceptable excuses for unacceptable behavior. And the power of this particular lecture is that you need to stop wasting your time trying to make someone wrong. I mean, that is a lesson that I've been working on for my whole life. So I'm talking to myself just as you is we want to make people admit that they're wrong, but it's never going to happen because everyone just makes a rationalization. So let me give you some examples, but you see rationalizations everywhere and we see it in ourselves. There's things that we know we should do, and then we make up all of these acceptable excuses of why we shouldn't. Our brain is so smart on coming up with reasons to satisfy our id. Like maybe your ego says, or your superego says, you better study, you better listen to the lectures, but your id says, no, I'm tired. I would rather just lay around. I want to watch my shows. I want to do something else. And so then your rationalization would be like, you know what? I feel like that teacher can't teach anyway. So it's just a waste of my time. A lot of people you'll see sometimes they say, oh, why didn't you do well on the test? And I'll say, oh, the teacher can't teach. Instead of maybe taking some responsibility of like, oh, maybe I could have studied better. So if you do take responsibility for everything that happens to you, I don't know if that's good to take responsibility for everything that happens for you. And in fact, like when we think about depression, that's what they find is people take too much responsibility. So we kind of have to have that balance thing again. Remember that serenity prayer? Accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Is we got to look at things and we got to like hold on to what we can control and acknowledge it. Okay, yeah, I played a role in this, but then we also have to acknowledge that there's other things beyond our control. Okay, let me go on with this rationalization. So there was a few with schoolwork there. Not studying enough. You blame it on the teacher. You blame it on, oh, this or that. Making excuses. Let's try another one. Okay, so let's say that you guys are pulling out of a driveway and you run into an expensive car. I don't know. Maserati, Tesla, BMW. I don't know. Some kind of expensive car. And your car isn't so expensive. So the id says, run, 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 run. And the superego says, no, you're supposed to leave a note. You just hit their car. Come on, you just messed up their car. They didn't do anything to you. And then the ego says, let me try to make everybody happy. Okay, well, if they drive that expensive car, they have money that they can fix it. And it's just a little scratch. I mean, come on. They could fix that with some touch-up paint or something. I'm just going to go. You see how that takes away the guilt, that takes away that nagging superego, and there you have it. But let's pretend that you run into a car that's not so expensive. It's the same level as your car. You'll probably use a similar, or if the car has any scratches on it, you say, oh, they're not going to notice another scratch. So any behavior, people can make up excuses. I remember I had a student, she said, my boyfriend said that the reason why he cheated on me was because I made him do it. What? Really? Oh my goodness. And so like the person, instead of accepting responsibility, you know what? I cheated on them. I should not have done that. They told the other person, well, you made me do it. Do you see how that's kind of a rationalization? Okay, so let me take the most heinous crime of them all. The one that in our society nobody's going to accept. It's really, really one that people just, oh, they back off, is child molesters. So a lot of child molesters, what you'll see is when you ask them, like, how could you do that? Even if you had those impulses, you should have controlled yourself. I understand. I'm not saying you're a bad person because you have those impulses, but still, you needed to try to get support, or you needed to find some kind of help if you could for that, or engage in some of your own ways of coping with it and without hurting someone else. What they'll say, oh, but the child wanted it. The child was the one that came on to me. This was not me, it was them. And our society is so prudish not to recognize that that children have sexual urges. So I don't want to offend you or get you upset, but I wanted to take an extreme. And everybody, even when they do extreme behaviors, they tend to rationalize. So the more energy that you spend trying to make the other person see that they're wrong, remember, we're wasting our mental energy. We need to just know that when you get arguing with somebody, it's extremely rare for someone to take responsibility for their behavior.